And welcome on in to the latest edition of the Blue Horseshoe Podcast. We'll call it the Blue Horseshoe Pod After Dark. It is late Wednesday night as Chris Ballard met with the media at the Scouting Combine earlier on Wednesday. Oh, before I go anywhere, George Bremer Ryan Hickey. Not that you didn't know, but hey, just as always, a reminder, especially if you are new to the pod, welcome. Appreciate you. Subscribe on YouTube, Blue Horseshoe Pod, and wherever you do get your podcasts, the same name. We got a lot to break down today, George. A
And hit
lot
the
to break
notifications
down.
bell. Subscribe and hit the notifications bell.
Great call. Great call. That's why you listen to George and not me. Not only subscribe, notifications as well. So you get updated on whenever we do drop our pods. Like we're doing late night tonight on Wednesday. You can get your fix of the Blue Horseshoe Pod. We got a lot to break down, George. Report cards came out. The Colts did not fare very well. We'll talk about the importance. There's a lot of fluff in there, but we'll give you the important details from that report card from the NFLPA. Basically, the Colts players grading the Colts as the organization, but a lot to get into with Chris Ballard as well. First thing, though, George, since you were boots on the ground at the Scouting Combine in Indy, I'm sure Shane Steichen, who was under the weather, could not meet the media. I'm sure he was devastated not to expound on his fun offseason, not to give every single detail of what he's looking for at the combine, and not to basically give away the entire draft board here on day number one, essentially the combine. I'm sure he is right now still to this day kicking himself, for this hour, I should say, kicking himself that he couldn't meet you guys.
Hey, he's gonna meet us next week, so pick him right back up here. He will still be dispensing all of those details. I'm sure he'll probably set the draft board for us and give us the entire free agent list. The whole thing. But no, I mean Shane. Look, Shane wins games. No one's gonna care. It doesn't really matter what he does. And I think they've
Or
got a lot.
says,
The good thing about this setup is they got a lot of guys who are really good with media. Whether it's Anthony Richardson, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner, Zaire Franklin. So you don't really need the head coach in those moments. And when Shane does need to be the guy, he's the guy. But I mean, obviously, I think we all know he's not big on details, and he's certainly not. The thing is, he does want to talk about scheme,
no.
and he only wants to talk about football. So there's this wee little gray area somewhere in between there that is, and if you hit that sweet spot, you get some pretty good answers. But it can be
Belichick-esque almost in a way. You can
a little
get Bill
bit,
sometimes asking
a
the
little
right
bit.
question on the right day. He'll give you 10 minutes on
If it leads to
whatever.
6 Super Bowls, though, I mean, hey,
Hey, I
there are
won't be
worse
complaining.
outcomes. There are worse fates.
So Shane was not there. Like you said, he'll meet with the media next week, but Chris Ballard was there. And we'll get George's biggest takeaway from this in a second. But I think overall, George, whether it was we'll say the national media session at the podium, or there was the, local scrum afterwards, correct me if I'm wrong. Again, you were there and kind of got to read the body language on top of just listening to what Chris Ballard said. At least from my perspective, it feels like he was more open and more willing to commit on some certain things where before he felt like he commits to nothing and it kind of, leaves everything open. It felt like today, George, that he was willing to be more committal on a few certain topics. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think some of that's they're not dealing with all the quarterback stuff. That's
That could
paranoia
be.
is rampant in the NFL. We know that anyway. But when it comes to quarterbacks, it's like nuclear secrets. You just don't whisper anything. And so I think the fact that they've got the quarterback taken care of, and that a lot of things we were asking about today are in-house guys, so he can be a little more open because, like with Michael Pittman, you've got, as he said today, you've got franchise tag as a tool. Clearly not the first option. They want to get a long-term deal done. But they know you can make a statement like, yes, I expect him to be on the roster in September, like he said during the local scrum, because you have the mechanism to make that happen, as opposed to the draft where you can't say we're going to take a wide receiver and then you get, you know, on draft day. And what if Dallas Turner and Brock Bowers are both staring you in the face? You may take something other than a wide receiver. So I think that's a part of it. Is the questions we were asking were more things that he can answer, but also franchise is in a healthier spot. I think it's easier to be in a little bit better mood and to be a little more open when you're 9-8 and you feel like the arrow's pointing up than when you're 3-14 or 4-13, 4-12-1.
4,
Don't
12, and 1. Don't forget the
give
tie.
away too much there. 4-12-1, and you have no idea what the future holds. Um, so I think overall the buzz was just better. He certainly was in a good mood. I felt like today. I mean, he was joking with some people and shut down a couple guys, but did it in that sort of ornery Chris Ballard way. I know there were a couple times he just flat out started laughing because the question was just either ridiculous or we knew we weren't going to get an answer. At some point on the report card, he said during a long answer on the report card, he said there are parts of that he would probably debate with the players. And Bob Kravitz asked him for specifics. That's one of the times he just started laughing, like not going to answer that. But it was all good natured, and I think it's probably a sign they feel good about where they are right now with what 73 million and change in salary cap space and the 15th pick in the draft and a quarterback that they feel like has a really bright future. Um, probably a little bit healthier situation than a year ago.
Oh, without a doubt. Well, you are 100% right about that. Coming off of a head coaching search that took what felt like forever. And you're still trying to fill out the staff at this point last year, still trying to figure out what quarterback is going to be at the board at 4. Yeah, you are 100% right about that. A little bit of a difference today versus, let's say, last year around this time. That's for sure. So, George, your biggest takeaway from Chris Ballard's session with the media today was what?
Michael Pittman's going to be here. I think we rarely get anything declarative from him or any of the GMs. I mean, very seldom. They'll point you in a direction. They'll hint strongly at something, but you rarely get a straight up answer. And for him to say yes, he in his mind, Michael Pittman will be here in September. Not shocking by any stretch of imagination. Maybe to a few national guys who keep mocking him to other teams and free agency. But I think anybody who follows this team knew it's a move that had to happen. Receivers Pittman's age and as accomplished as he is, never hit the open market. It just doesn't happen. But it was good to get confirmation, I guess, and kind of close that chapter. Now, could Michael Pittman do a 180 and demand a trade and make a stink and change that? Maybe that's why it's not 100%, but certainly not the way things are headed right now. Ballard said that they've had some conversations with his agent, that those are going well. And that clearly the hope is that they won't have to use the franchise tag. They'll be able to sign him to a long-term deal.
Right. And that obviously deadline March 5th is rapidly approaching. And like you said, Ballard's looking to, it sounds like first get that long-term deal done and avoid using the franchise tag. I'm with you, by the way. The biggest takeaway is just the fact that Ballard was so definitive of like, hey, he's going to be here. You never hear that sort of commitment, especially in February about a player. But Ballard obviously, first of all, knows the importance of Michael Pittman Jr. to this offense and realizes I got to do whatever it takes, even if it means using the franchise tag for the first time in 11 years. I got to do whatever it takes to get this guy here. Like you said, that's not true. That's what we expect to happen. What's interesting, I thought, though, too, is in his national session, they were talking about, he was kind of talking about, the contract negotiations, they're ongoing. I do laugh that he called Michael Pittman Jr.'s agent a very good agent, which correct me if I'm wrong, it's the same agent Jonathan Taylor has, right, George?
No.
No.
I think David Mulag, I'm going to butcher
I know. That's
his name.
that's why I tried to
Mulugeta, I
avoid it.
believe.
Mulugeta.
I know the biggest client I can remember. He's got a bunch. He's
That
one of the
name sounds
bigger
familiar.
agents.
It's
The biggest one I remember him having was Cleo Mack. But I'm sure he's been on some of these other guys too. He's got a lot. I mean, a lot of big name clients. He's right up there among
not.
the biggest agents in the NFL. So, and it's somebody that has done some deals in the past with the Colts, and obviously just from Ballard's tone, talks right now are not contentious. You can kind of tell that. And again, completely different than the Jonathan Taylor situation because receivers are going to get paid. I thought Duke Tobin was hilarious on Tuesday, when they asked him, like, why did you franchise tag T. Higgins? And he said, well, we had the cap space. We were allowed to do it. He's a great player, so we did. And I thought probably just about as simple as that when it comes to receiver. Running backs is a total different situation. But I think even if you're Pittman, okay, if you get tagged, you've got till what, mid-July to sign a long-term deal. If that doesn't come through, then you're on a 1-year deal for $21.8 million. If they tag you next year, I think it's 125%. So off the top of my head, that's going to be 28, 29 million, somewhere in that range. And then if they, I don't think they can tag you a third time anymore, the way CBA is. So you're going to get paid one way or another if you're Pittman. So you're not nearly back in the corner. I think it just feels like everything's going a little bit more smoothly. Now, who knows? Next Tuesday, everything could change. But as of now, it seems like it's a pretty cordial situation and probably going to lead to an outcome that the team and the player both feel good about.
Now I know why David. I'm not even trying to say his last name. My apologies. We'll just go with David, Michael Pittman Jr.'s agent. Now I know why I thought he was Jonathan Taylor's agent, because I've heard his name a ton. He's Deshaun Watson's agent. Obviously, that name was in the news a lot these last few years. That makes okay. So anyway, to clear that up there, we really took a turn here after dark, that's for sure. But I wanted to bring up initially was when talking about the MPJ contract negotiations, Chris Ballard used the word compromise, which I thought was interesting, because I do wonder like how much, again, if you, with the cap space the Colts have and a rookie quarterback deal, number one, I wonder, I mean, obviously they have a lot of free agents to sign, but I do wonder if Ballard's looking to maybe free up cap space to make another swing, whether it's a trade or sign a free agent, to kind of really kind of bring more talent on this team and take advantage of what is a rookie contract right now that the Colts have in Anthony Richardson. And I wonder how much right now Michael Pittman Jr. is willing to compromise. Again, I think he's going to be a Colt 100%. At this point, I would be shocked. Even on the franchise tag for a 1-year deal, I'll be shocked if Michael Pittman Jr. basically says no, holds out, and forces a trade. I think he's giving the Colts week 1. But I do wonder, like that word really stuck out to me, compromise, because we saw Ballard and maybe to an extent Irsay as well were strong on their Jonathan Taylor negotiations before giving in. I wonder how firm they're going to hold here. And honestly, maybe you know better than me, I don't even know who has the leverage at this point in terms of trying to get a deal done before that March 5th deadline.
Yeah, I don't know. Because it's a different situation, as we talked about, completely than Taylor. That deadline's important, obviously, to the Colts, because you don't want, I think Pittman has a little more leverage in that sense, I think, because the Colts don't want him on the open market. But how much leverage is there when the Colts can use the franchise tag and there's not really anything you can do about it? So that's where it's kind of offset. I do think it's a situation where Pittman has said before, if you get the franchise tag, in some ways it's a compliment. Some ways it's the team telling you, you're worth so much to us. We're going to pay you as one of the top 5 players at your position in the league. And he pointed out that you can still do long-term deals. So I don't think he's going to react really adversely on Tuesday. Now we get into July and things still aren't done. Things could be different. You saw that with Taylor last year. Early in the year, it was all good and smooth. And then as, contract talks went on or didn't go on, as the case may be, things got a little rougher. But it ended, I think, in a way that everybody was fine with. I mean, obviously, Jonathan Taylor seems like a very happy man these days. And I think even during that national session, Ballard's face always lights up when he talks about Taylor these days, because he knows how good a running back he can be. And Taylor showed everybody again there in week 18 against the Texans just how good he can be. But I think right now with Pittman, like I said, I think the difference with Pittman is he knows he's going to get what, $49 or $50 million over the next 2 years if they tag him. And then he's going to be a free agent, and then he's going to be able to sign wherever he wants. So if that's your worst case scenario, there's not a lot to be really angry about.
No, you're right about that. I would love to be in his situation, facing that reality. That's for sure. But it is interesting because, like, when you think about it, right, like we, at least on the surface, expect Michael Pittman Jr. in terms of, let's say, overall dollars, maybe even, average annual salary. We expect him to be the big ticket item, right, for the Colts in terms of the biggest salary they're gonna pay, at least for their own guys. And that word compromise just has me wondering, is there something up Chris Ballard's sleeve where he's again, whether it's a free agent, I mean, we've seen a few guys now that have gotten tagged that could be traded. We've talked about L'Jarius Sneed before as well. He was tagged, and now the Chiefs maybe are open to shopping him. And then obviously, if you trade for the Chiefs defensive back, you have to pay him as well, a big time deal. I just wonder if that was a maybe not a subtle hint, but just maybe a peek behind the curtain of maybe Chris Ballard for the again truly living up to the words he spoke at the end of the season press conference when he said he wanted to, take advantage of having a quarterback on a rookie deal. That word just made my ears perk up a little bit and made me wonder if there's, again, if you're the Colts, I think you want to get that deal done before March 5th, just to almost just to get everything else going. Like, okay, that's the big ticket item. Now we know what money we have to spend for everything else. I just wonder, compromise. Could we see something in the future, George?
I think definitely from a Colts standpoint, you want that deal done going into free agency. If you can get it done before the league year starts and you have that number set, you can build everything else off of it. It's sort of like with the quarterback extensions. When you know they're coming up, you want to get them done so you have an idea of, okay, this is what we've got left over and this is what we can do, or we can restructure here, or whatever else you need to do. Compromise seemed to be the word of the week so far down there. I mean, I know a couple guys used it yesterday. Yeah, I think he's just meaning it's a big deal. And anytime you have these big deals, the Colts are obviously going to want the lowest number they can get. They're not going to try to lowball them, but they're going to want the lowest number they can get. And Pittman wants the highest number he can get because he's a player and that's what you do. And so they're just going to try to meet in the middle. But I think everybody knows it's going to be probably above 20 million, wherever it ends. It's going to be above 20 million. Somewhere between 20 and 25 would be my guess. Question is, how long is it? What are the guarantees? You have all those things going on. But I think from a Colts standpoint, you absolutely want to get this done before the franchise tag deal if you can. But if not, within that first week of the franchise tag before the league year starts, so that number's on the books. You get into that, like, let's just say between 20 and 25. So 22, just for the sake of argument, which is about where the franchise number is anyway, 21.8, something like that. Then okay, we got 51 million under the cap now to work with everybody else. I think that's the importance of getting it done, especially if, like you said, and he brought it up again today, that free agency is tough because the true A players get tagged. You're already seeing that. T. Higgins has been tagged. Sneed's going to be tagged, but he's going to get a chance to work out a trade. It sounds like Burns is going to get tagged in Carolina. It's how it goes. If you're truly an A guy, you get tagged. And then you end up paying B guys A money because they're the best guys on the market. And so he's always looking for that true A guy that snuck through. And we've seen him make moves before. I mean, the DeForest Buckner move was a really big deal. And that was a trade, but he signed him to a long-term extension, as part of that. You don't know, is there a situation out there, that a guy who's available who may not even know is available, who they're looking at? If there is, again, you want to get the Pittman deal done ahead of that so you can slot that in and know, have some cost certainty moving forward.
Agreed. And especially too, like as the draft gets closer, you see a lot of, especially if Ballard maybe has a trade lined up in his mind and wants to pursue someone, like you said, that maybe is available that we're not aware of, but that's not a free agent, that's still looking to get paid and that team doesn't want to pay them. You see a lot of those deals go down around the draft. And again, if you're the Colts and you slap the franchise tag on Michael Pittman, he's going to be there in 2024. But like I said, the longer that goes now, all of a sudden, if you're trying to make deals or if you're trying to make a draft day trade like they did with DeForest Buckner, then it's like, well, it gets a little bit harder to do if you don't, like, you still have that looming Michael Pittman Jr. contract hanging over your head. It just makes it, I'm with you, it makes it harder. So right now, would you say, George, March 5th is what, Monday? I should know this off the top of my head. I'm awful with dates. Thank you. Tuesday. Next time we are on this pod, is Michael Pittman Jr. signed long-term or think he's on the franchise tag?
It's a good question. They don't seem to be, I mean, it sounds like it's close, but it doesn't sound like it's imminent, if that makes sense. So I don't know.
Close yet so far.
It's going to be interesting to see, who digs in a little more as we get to the tag. Because I think what happens as you get to that tag is the Colts start saying, well, 21.8, and that's what we want to use as the basis for the long-term deal. And the players start saying, yeah, but if you tag me again next year, it's closer to 29, 28, 29. So that's the real number. And it can move in interesting ways. So I don't know. I feel like there'll be a long-term deal in place by training camp. I'll say that. I don't I
Okay.
think if he does get tagged, I think they'll work something out over the course of the spring and the summer. But these deals, as you know, there's so many details that go into them. It's not a simple business. You've got to, what's the guaranteed number? What are the escalators? What happens if you win the Super Bowl during there's all kinds of bonuses and things that are worked in, that even once you agree on the basics, getting down into those nitty gritty can take another couple weeks. So it's hard to say. If they've got the basics done now, he could be signed before next Tuesday. If not, you might have a deal in principle, as they like to say. And I know, I want to say when McAfee was on the tag 11 years ago, it wasn't very long. That somewhere fairly quickly in that tag, he signed a long-term deal. So I think that would be the idea again. Is that, and again, I think more than March 5th. I don't know, is it the 12th or the 19th when the league year starts? That is the big date because that's when your top 51 gets locked in, your salary cap starts to count, quote unquote. Right now, it's all just projections. You can kind of do what you want. But once the league year starts, now people start counting against the cap and, you know, again, any other move you want to make, even if there's not some blockbuster trade or there's not a big free agent signing, just the other deals within the house, Grover's deal and Julian Blackmon. And he said today that they'd like to have Kenny Moore back, but they're going to see how things work out. All of those deals, you would imagine, fall in line after the Michael Pittman contract.
Which is why I feel like they will get a deal done before March 5th. Just because, like I said, I think the domino effect, I think you said it perfectly. I think that once that one tips, then you could get every other duck in a row, if you will, so to speak. So I feel like from the Colts perspective, they are motivated to get a deal done before March 5th, just to again allow kind of get your books in order and kind of have an idea moving forward of what you have to spend. And that can again obviously help judge whether how aggressive you could be with some of these guys. And not that, a lot of Colts free agents are, let's say, going to be wanted by 15 teams, right? It's not like, someone, Kenny Moore, he's not going to have a market of 20 teams banging on his door to come get him. It's going to be a bidding war. But it just also helps you, get an idea of, could we maybe be a little bit more aggressive than we want it to be for one guy and maybe the price for another is too high, et cetera. But I think Pittman kind of feels like the first one. Once you get that done, everything else falls into place. So I'll say by Tuesday, next time unless we have an emergency pod, I guess we'll see. That's true with the Colts. They always do love giving you some breaking news late in the night. So assuming we are on a normal schedule, right, and talking next Wednesday, I will say by that time, Michael Pittman Jr. locked up and is a Colt for the long term. No franchise tag slapped on his back. It's also interesting, George, because we heard Chris Ballard kind of talk almost an absolute, actually for him, an absolute in saying that Michael Pittman Jr. will be on the team in 2024, one way or another, contract extension or franchise tag. Did you get the sense at all that he was maybe leaning towards picking one specific position in the draft at pick 15? Like, was there any sort of read on how he was looking at that 15th overall pick as we now really start to dive deep into draft season?
Seems like he has an idea of what he's going to do. He usually does. I mean, he wasn't quite as definitive as last year when he said he's going to get the best player in the draft at number 4. And you're all going, okay, what does that mean? Well, it turns out Anthony Richardson's what he was talking about. But I do think they've got a pretty good idea because, again, in that local session, he said something along the lines. Somebody asked him, I can't remember what the exact question was. It was something along the lines of, which position are you leaning towards in the draft or something along those lines. And he, of course, laughed that one off. And then he said, well, it's going to be a position that lines up on Sundays and you'll be calling out their names, which to me leans more towards a skill guy, whether it's a pass rusher, whether it's a corner. I mean, it didn't really limit the ones that you would guess anyway, receiver, tight end, corner, edge rusher. But it does, you don't know because he's always good about leaving breadcrumbs. And then once the draft's over, you can go back and kind of, okay, he told us this there. And it's hard to tell right now. At one point, also during that session, he said something about you want to make sure it might have been the same answer that you want to make sure that you have an open mind because you don't want to pass over a really like top flight talent because you got locked in. And so that made me think, well, maybe offensive tackle is at least a possibility because, you know, you don't know. If Joe Alt's there at 15 somehow, maybe you say, okay, better take him, I
Right.
think that's what he's talking about. You don't know. You can have in your mind it's going to be a receiver because that's probably we talked with Eric Edholm last week. People can go and watch that. He had a great breakdown of the draft class, and it'll probably help you here as on-field drills start to go and have some ideas for people to watch. And I think reading between the lines of Eric, my guess would be wide receiver from what the value is at that point in the draft. And we know that that's which way Ballard ultimately leans. But at the same time, if you get there and your options are, let's say, Brian Thomas, Brock Bowers, Dallas Turner, maybe it's tight end, maybe it's edge rusher that you're going to lean towards. And I don't know. I mean, I swear every day another quarterback gets pushed into the top 10, which is great for the Colts. I mean, go from 4 to 5 to 6 to 9, and it doesn't matter. But if you take right now, they're talking 3, maybe 4 quarterbacks in the top 10, at least a couple offensive tackles, and at least a couple receivers. Well, that's 8 right there. If you go on the high end of all of that, somebody's coming down, somebody's dropping a little bit further than expected. But I do it does seem like he's at least leaning in a certain direction. Again, though, it might be just that same kind of sleuthing of saying, well, look at the draft class, look at the value. Wide receiver is like right now, that's the one I'd say is most likely. And then corner and then edge rusher.
That's really honestly shocking to me for a few reasons. Number one, that's not Chris Ballard. Like I saw Nate Atkins tweet it, and I was like, he said that he got the sense of that Ballard knows the position. I immediately wrote down defensive end because I'm like that would be a Chris Ballard selection, right? He's not going to go the sexy, flashy skill guy. He's going to go offensive line, defensive line, and go try to go young there. And then so that's why I'm like shocked that maybe there's hits that you're picking up that it could be a receiver. That's number one, because that's not really a Chris Ballard first round receiver. That's a Ryan Grigson move right there. That's not a Chris Ballard move. Number one. Number two, it's also interesting because obviously, like 14 picks in front of the Colts. So no one could guess right now what the order is going to be, right? It's like 1 in a million. So trying to guess the lottery, the first 14 picks in order of how it goes, like trying to get a perfect March Madness bracket. Good luck. But it's like it could go a million different ways. But like you said, with how, and I know we're still 2 months away, but how it feels like where there's like 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the top 10, and it feels like there's another 3 or 4 receivers as well in that pile. Receiver now, especially in college football, with so many 3 and 4 wide receiver sets, that I feel like the depth at that position is arguably maybe the greatest at any position in the draft every year. It feels like you can get a receiver in the second, third round. Hell, the Colts got Josh Downs in round number 3, and you feel pretty good about him going forward. That's why I'm shocked. Like if Chris Ballard truly does go receiver, because at that point you're probably picking the 4th, maybe the 5th wide receiver off the board at that point at 15, when you could in the second or third round get, I don't know, the 10th or 11th best receiver. And it's like, you could go like, is there really that big of a difference or that big of a gap at that point? That's what also surprised me, just because the value at receiver is just so high later in the draft versus a lot of other positions. Edge rusher, right? Go back to last week. Eric basically told you that the edge rush position is very shallow. Once you get past the first 2 or 3 guys, it's kind of, and even offensive tackle, kind of this way you read it, kind of similar. We get some big names at the top, and then you kind of go deeper, and it's like, maybe not. I would be surprised. Again, we'll see how the draft goes. Maybe Maybe Malik Neighbors is wide receiver one, and all of a sudden Chris Ballard gets super crazy, trades up for Marvin Harrison Jr. We're talking about MHJ with AR. It's a lot of accurate. That's a lot of initials, by the way. That'd be an MPJ. Let's just keep it going. MPJ, MHJ. Let's just ride that wave there. Or the juniors.
AP and JD.
Now we're talking. And JT.
Get them all set.
But that's why I would be surprised if it is receiver, just because the value and like the sheer, you're picking the fifth wide receiver, maybe. I know in past drafts with Justin Jefferson, he was like the third or fourth receiver off the board. And obviously that looks pretty damn good. So I understand, like, just because you get the fifth wide receiver doesn't mean that guy's not going to be very good. But the depth is there. And Ballard even talked about the depth. He compared this wide receiver draft class to the one Michael Pittman was in back in 2020, which obviously they got him in the second round, great value. But that was the Justin Jefferson draft, if I'm not mistaken, along with Jamar Chase. So you had some big time names in there as well.
Oh, absolutely. But Pittman was their first pick of that draft. It was second round, but they traded out the first round.
Right.
And Pittman was the first pick that they took. I think trade down is still a very likely possibility here.
Cover your ears, Colts fans.
Especially
I'm
if he's
sure they
only
love trade down.
I mean, it all comes down to his board, but if he's there on the clock and there's 5 or 6 guys that he has rated around the same spot, gonna trade down 5 or 6 spots and get who's left. I mean, that's kind of how it works most of the time with him. Need a partner, obviously, so it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. But it will be. He always kind of gives you reason to take both arguments, and he said a couple times today that the number one priority is to protect Anthony Richardson. So does that mean they are going to go after one of these offensive tackles? Maybe. Braden Smith just had surgery. Sounds like he's doing well, but maybe they looked that route. They have a couple young tackles in the system as it is, but I don't know. He said before that I don't think anything's going to stop him from adding to the offensive line if he feels like that's the best route to go. He also said that, at tight end, the hardest ones to find are the blockers, the guys that can come out there and really stonewall people. It's easier to find the receiving tight ends than it is to find the protecting kind. So does that mean he doesn't want Brock Bowers? Probably not, but you just don't know. He always kind of leaves things open to interpretation, which is what you got to do, at his spot. So if it's an offensive lineman, I wouldn't be shocked. If it's a defensive lineman, I definitely wouldn't be shocked. I think that's the other part that Eric kind of really, like you're talking about, go back and listen or watch that pod, depending on how you consume this every week. And you will see Eric Edholm talking about maybe an edge rusher is the guy there, or maybe it's a corner. And Ballard definitely didn't shy away from the corner conversation today. He was asked directly whether or not having 2 young starters would give him pause. And he said, no, that it wouldn't matter. So we know this. He's going to take best player available. That's absolutely, I don't think there's any doubt about that. But kind of got the sense, like Nate did, that he has at least some outline of who that might be.
Interesting. Wow. This is a different Chris Ballard. Leaving hints being
a lot of it he's done before. But I just feel like I said, I think that it's a different situation. You don't have to. Last year, it was pretty much lockdown. Don't mention a quarterback. Everybody in the building was pretty much told that. Don't, even in passing, don't compare any of them. Don't bring anybody up. Don't tip your hand where we're going. Just don't talk about the quarterbacks at all. And so there really was a lockdown right towards the draft itself. We started to hear a lot of Anthony Richardson, I think like the night before the draft. Until then, it was all over the place. I think you heard them connected to every single quarterback at one point or another, before they made the move. And so I think that's why now he is being more open, but you can read into it whatever you want.
You know what it is, George? I was just thinking about this when you were talking. For years, right? Fans and media were pestering him about receiver. Hey, draft a receiver, right? Almost like refused to do it. And I swear, he may never admit, but I feel like sometimes out of spite would be like, screw it, I'm trading out of this. No receiver taken in the draft. Then obviously it was quarterback. Now there's like the first year where like there's no one need, and there's also no one, like the fan base is not united on one position. And so now it's just kind of like when he's not having just one guy or one position thrown in his face all the time, it's almost like a different, I feel like a different ballot. It's like, okay, now I can actually work and have a little fun here.
I think he's definitely enjoying this. I mean, they're in a situation where they can go in a lot of different directions, and it sounds like they're going to have some options. I mean, the one I think the biggest clue he's given us, he didn't really repeat this today, but he said it in January. They want to add explosive guys to the roster, and he said at that time he thought that they would have opportunities to do that. That's kind of why I start leaning towards receiver, either receiver or tight end or edge rusher. I mean, that's where you're going to get the most explosion. One of those three spots. We'll see. You know, and I still think he will do. He'll take the best player available when he's up there. We've seen it for what 7, 8 years now. I don't think that's going to change. And the question is, who's that going to be? I think receiver, tight end, defensive end, corner. I mean, just from what we've heard about this draft, I think he'll be one of those positions.
I think also too, having a quarterback you feel really good about and a head coach you feel really good about as well eases a lot of stress on Chris Ballard. That is for sure.
He
Speaking of,
mentioned the head coach a couple of times today too, in how much confidence he has in him and his staff.
let me ask you this actually before, because I do want to bring up Shane Steichen in the sense of the NFLPA grades and how the Colts graded their coach. Any other takeaways from Chris Ballard's press conferences, multiple, on Wednesday, the scouting combine we haven't mentioned already?
Jim Irsay's still involved in the
Yes, I
day-to-day
knew we were forgetting something.
operations. So, not shocking again, just like Michael Pittman coming back is not shocking, but another one of those things which is good to hear the confirmation that yes, he's getting better. Yes, he's improving day by day. But he's been in touch. Shane and Chris have both been talking to him. Sounds like on a pretty regular basis. And Ballard said they're not going to do anything without his approval. So anytime anything's come up, Irsay's kept in the loop. So um, it'll be interesting to see who represents the team in 2 weeks at the owners' meetings. I would not think doctors are going to necessarily want Jim Irsay to be that person. Those things, I'm sure, for owners can get a little bit. Your blood pressure might rise, a time or two at one of these meetings. So I would imagine one of the daughters will go out there. But it'll be interesting to see, and that will be a story. There's no question about it, because anytime an NFL owner is not able to attend one of these things, it's always going to be a headline kind of a thing. But it's good to know, he's not just well enough to tweet. He's involved in day-to-day business.
His cognitive functions have returned, which is good. And obviously, like I said, on the road to recovery, which is obviously in the game of life they're all playing, first and foremost, absolutely most important. So very happy to hear that, and glad that it's another positive update. Those keep stacking so far on top of each other, which obviously is very good. So then what's also interesting today, George, and I love how the NFLPA did this today with everyone kind of in town in Indy and having their teams available. They've released this survey where 76% of the entirety of the NFL were surveyed on how their own team was. They have a million different categories for them to grade. We'll give you some of those here in a second. But overall, let me just ask you this. The Colts graded overall 22nd in the NFL out of 32 teams. Now, what they were being asked to grade, stuff like facilities, the cafeteria food were asked, nutritionists, locker room setup, team travel, weight room, head coach, owner, a lot of different aspects that touch a lot of different parts of the franchise. We don't know how many Colts participated. We just know that 76% of players throughout the entire NFL were participating. So you could assume at least a good amount of Colts participated in the survey. 22 out of 32. And a lot of low marks here for facilities were a D, food, C, strength coaches, C, team travel, D. Apparently the plane is a little too tight. Head coach, A minus, owner, C. Was there a grade? Was it the overall arching? Was like, what was the biggest, I guess, either shock or takeaway you had from this? Let me ask you this, George. But actually, before we get that, how important is this to you? Because a lot of this stuff, again, facilities, weight training, weight room itself, food, like you could argue how much does it impact winning? In your mind, like when you see like what the NFLPA was asking their players to grade, like how serious do you take this report card, I guess, if you will?
I mean, you're always gonna. I think there's always a level of importance to it, just because you want to know what the players are saying and how they're feeling. I think it's interesting because the facilities have been upgraded a lot since Chris Ballard got here, and they're still in the process of upgrading things. So it'll be interesting to see if that grade improves. That was funny. The food went from an F to a C. So obviously, somebody did something right in the cafeteria
A
this
little extra
year.
pepper.
Something got done there. Got a major boost up. But
Hey, at
I
least
think
they're not like the
Ballard,
Bengals. You see the
right,
Bengals
right. I did
not
not.
offering they don't offer their team 3 square meals a day. I'm sorry
See,
that I
that's
lied. They do that 1 day a week on Wednesday. Wednesday is the
mm,
only day at the Bengals facility you can get 3 meals at the facility.
yeah, that just seems dumb. And on the Colts side, they're one of 7 teams that don't have game day daycare. That just seems like something that you can very easily fix, and should. You don't ever want to be one of only 7 teams in the league that aren't doing something as simple and as basic as that, especially with your quarterback expecting right now. And that's something we haven't touched on yet. The announcement that Anthony Richardson is both engaged and his fiance is expecting their first child. So, going to get that game day daycare taken care of.
Two for
Um,
one.
Absolutely. That's a huge moment. Pittman's already got 2 kids, and I think it's probably that to me is one of those things that you just want the players' mind off of it. Why do you want guys worried during the game, about how the family's doing? So take care of that. But I also think there's an element here of most workplaces are probably not going to score really high. I mean, if they came to your office or my office, we're probably going to complain about most of what's going on.
That's a
It's
great
just the
point.
way it is. The break room
It's a
needs
great
more
point.
soda, or the bathrooms are always dirty, or whatever. So I think you got to take both of those things into account. Understand that um, probably human nature is that now good. Some teams scored really, really high. And I think probably that matters more because it tells you like the Vikings and the Dolphins were so far separated that they're probably doing something right. And maybe some other teams should, spend at the owners' meetings next week. Hey, what are you guys doing that's, making these scores so high? Um, I think anytime you get that kind of consensus from the players, that probably tells you something. It will matter if you start to see it in a locker room on a daily basis. And we don't, we're not there all the time, obviously, and we're not there 24 hours a day. So it's just that 45-minute window 3 days a week. So that's not exactly, every minute of every day. But you can get a general sense when people are not very happy, in their workplace. And I think the players overall don't seem to have a lot of problem with that. Someone was joking that the light problem is just because they keep drafting so many 6'8" guys that, if you have more 6'5" guys, they have more leg room. Josh Downs probably not complaining about the leg room. Jelani Woods, a little bit different story.
You are right about that. Yeah. Draft shorter guys and you'll have less problems. I I think a lot of this is fluff. Like you said, I didn't think about that. It's a good point. If someone went to your job and surveyed, asking you all these different questions of all different areas, your workplace, no matter where you work, unless it's like Google, is probably not going to score very well. So that's a great way to frame it. And something, yeah. So I think so. Knowing that on the surface, most teams are not going to grade well just because, right? In general, everything like you said, there's always something that can be improved, and always something that can, bother some players more than others. But also, I think there are a few things that do pertain to winning that are important that are a little bit concerning for the Colts here. I think the overall, like the 3 biggest things I would focus on from this report card: training staff, strength coaches, head coach. Because I think all 3 of those do equate to how you perform on the field. The Colts, when it comes to head coach, Shane Steichen, no surprise, A- there. But training staff, B-, strength coaches, C. And the NFLPA at least was nice enough to also provide context and not just giving these grades. And I want to read you here, George, because this is what I'm talking about to kind of
Mhm.
bring to life like how this impacts winning. So, at least according to some Colts players, the players responded that the training room is understaffed, making it difficult to get the best possible treatment to play and recover. Survey also highlighted issues with the weight room, which respondents believe lacks necessary equipment, and also the strength coaches pointing out they are not getting the best possible individualized plans to maximize their performance. That you can equate that right to winning.
Mhm.
And that is inexcusable of the fact that there's not like, I mean, we talked about Jonathan Taylor's ankle and was he faking it? Was he exaggerating, et cetera, as the holdouts? Like, but you look at that right there, like, and there's a small chance maybe the Colts weren't properly staffed, especially during training camp. You have 90 players there. Like, if you can't give your guys the best treatment possible, what are we doing, George? That's the difference between maybe a guy like Jonathan Taylor on the field or not, a guy like Anthony Richardson on the field or not. Like that should be like bare minimum. There's no question there. That's an area that's concerning when you get a C in that department, and a B minus in another as well. That impact your ability to get on the field, stay on the field.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at last year, you missed the playoffs by one game, and you're starting running backs out for 4 games. Did this play a part in that? Him not being there for the first month of the season? Don't know for sure. But there's
Right.
certainly reason to question it. Or any other player could have possibly come back faster from an injury than they did. There's no doubt about it. And I think Ballard took this head on. He said he does take it seriously. There are some parts of it that he might debate. But he also said that they're going to ask questions and they're going to get feedback. I know that, Rusty Jones, who's one of the most well-respected sports performance guys in the league, has retired. So they've got a new coach coming in that. Minnis, I believe, Mike Minnis. Trying to remember, it just was a couple days ago, so I don't have this one absolutely, but it came from Philadelphia. I know that he came from Philly, so somebody that
Makes
Shane's
sense.
trusts, and somebody that Shane's been with in the past, and so we'll see. I'm sure some things are going to change, and I would imagine if I'm him and I see this report card, I'm texting players and I'm talking to Chris Ballard and I'm saying, hey, what can we do? What specifically can we do to make this better? I think something you absolutely have to be on. And I think those are the ones, yeah, to me, look, the leg room on the flight, if you could do something about it, certainly. If not, I don't know that that's quite as big a deal. It's certainly inconvenience and certainly something I wouldn't be happy about if I was one of the larger guys on the team. But at the same time, not the kind of immediate issues that the training staff is and the strength staff is. If there's equipment that's not there in the weight room, find a way to get it. Get it in there, get these guys what they need. But I do think, from what Ballard said today, I think those issues will be addressed, and I would imagine the team's going to try to do what they can in the areas that it's possible to do. I don't know enough about running a football team to really know, which of these things are real and which of these things are maybe just the way it has to be. So, but at least the organization has, their ear to the ground here, and I think that's an important element. And
What's
we'll
also
see if the grades
interesting.
get better next year.
That's true. That's true. I mean, the food did. So hopefully whatever they did in the kitchen translates to the training staff and the weight room, etc. But it's also interesting because Jim Irsay was graded just kind of on the curve, or I guess on the scale of willingness to invest in the team, right? And training staff, the weight room, the players are complaining about is obviously that's
Mhm.
investing time and money into that to making sure that it's up to their standards. And Jim Irsay was a C. That's actually one of the lowest rated owners. Now, again, Clark Hunt, ironically enough, was the lowest
Mhm.
graded owner, F minus. I didn't even know you could go that low. I honestly thought F was just the lowest you can go. F minus was the Chiefs owner, how the
That's what
players
my
voted
grades in
him.
school.
That is,
That's my math grade. That's my math report card. Pretty much my entire
sheesh.
career, grade school on F minus.
That's why you get into journalism, especially sports journalism.
And then they always hit me with these stats, and I'm like, hey, now come on, no
Like
math.
salary,
Let's
dead cap
pause here.
number,
Yeah, 73 million is a
AAV.
lot of fingers for me to count on. Come on, make it a little bit easier on me. But seriously, that's one of the point. The Chiefs had a lot of the same issues. Facilities were a lot of the complaints, and they won the Super Bowl. So, I think you have to be realistic, but you have to. It's like any other workplace. If everybody in the office is complaining about not having a coffee machine, maybe you can get a coffee machine. But if everybody is complaining about wanting to move to a different building, that might not be quite as realistic. You might not be able to get that done. So I think that the important thing is that you can see if these grades go up, because I think I do think you want the players to feel like the owner is going to do everything possible to help you win, and B, um, that you've got everything you need on a daily basis in the facility. I don't think you ever want, just like I was talking about on game day, you don't want them worried about how the kids are. On a day-to-day basis, you don't want them worried about what the plan is and whether it's going to work. Shane is so detail oriented. I'd be shocked if he's not all over this. I mean, he is already made some major changes that we can see in the media in the building. Just things like playing highlights during the week of whoever the opponent is, past games against that opponent. There's a TV in the hallway when they're going out the practice field, and it's got a loop of highlights over the years from playing whatever team it is. A guy who's that committed to that, I imagine, is going to look into the weight room and look into the training staff, find out what they can do to be better in those areas.
I hope so, George, because at this point, like, I think what makes a good owner in sports is just an owner that does whatever it takes to win, like puts the players in positions to succeed. It sounds simple. Right? I feel like we talk about it a lot. It sounds so simple. Oh, yeah, just give them whatever tools they need to succeed. It is not that simple from a monetary perspective, or like you said, sometimes just from knowing what the players truly need in order to succeed. I hope they do take this seriously. Again, in the areas we highlighted, some okay, fine. The leg room with the plane, can you really, if you charter one plane, are you going to really do that much? And is it that much of an inconvenience on a 2-hour flight? Can you deal with it? You could probably deal with it. We can live with some of those, fine. But like you said, you just, especially now with where this team is, right? Coming off a 9-8 year, you have a lot of optimism, like real optimism for the first time in a long time. You think you got your quarterback, you got cap space, you have a young team you like, you got a head coach you really like as well. Like, this team is trending forward. The last thing you want, if you are Chris Ballard, if you're Shane Steichen, if you are Jim Irsay, is to have small, stupid things like an understaffed training room, like an outdated weight room, like even a weight room program in season that players feel like it's not like updated, or players do feel like it's updated. Like having those small things, just like you said, just to not think about it. The less they have to think about all the other distractions around them, the more focused they can be on getting better themselves, focus on the opponent that week. It's just like the more you eliminate distractions, the better this team is going to be. And you just don't want what is a promising future right now ruined by something as small as not hiring an extra, trainer or two. Like, it sounds simple, but right now, like, that's sounds like what the players are upset about. You have enough money. It's very easy to do. Just make the change.
Yep, get it down. I think that's what the NFLPA does this for, to
Yes.
shine a light on some of these things, and then there can be positive change. And like I said, I think the big thing now is, what does it look like going forward? What are those grades next year, the year after that? Do they make some of these changes? Do they address some of these areas? And at least right now, Chris Ballard sounds like that's something he's open to doing. I would imagine, like I said, I imagine Shane's all football all the time. He definitely doesn't want to hear about any of this. Fix it. I can just see him right now. Like, this does not help me draw up a play for Sunday. Fix this. We need to get this taken care of. Um, and they do. I mean, at the end of the day, especially the stuff like staffing in the training room and the equipment in the weight room, that feels like things that are very much under your control. That you need to just go out and find a way to make it right.
Absolutely. Especially like I said, when you have injuries to two of your biggest players in AR and JT, just make sure you have the capabilities in place to get them on the field as quick as possible. Then when they're on the field, make sure they are training in a way that keeps them as healthy as possible to make sure they could stay on the field as long as possible. And if you want to add some mac and cheese during the week, or whatever, spice it up a little bit, they can't hurt morale.
A little more barbecue sauce in there. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but something went right last year. If you make that jump again, it's going to be an A. So we'll see if they can keep the momentum rolling. Go from F to C. Again, I'm not great at math, but the next two grades up, right? You'd be an A.
The only good news is the only A they did get in this report card, head coach Shane Steichen, which also, by the way, I mean, maybe this is just a lot of teams just trying to bow down to their coaches. A minus is 18th. Shane Steichen
Wow.
is ranked 18th out of 32. Now, some of those guys like Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll were like A plus and A fired. So that he's going to
Right.
climb up just from that. But that is, in a way, fascinating. All these coaches getting A pluses and A's. And even, I guess, I don't know how they order the A minuses. I think D'Amico Ryans was an A minus. Maybe they just do it by record and playoff appearance. Maybe that's it. But 18th out of 32. No shock who's
Yeah,
last. Do you see who's last?
I did. And that was stunning to me that the Josh McDaniels would be at the bottom of the list.
Stunned that he
It
got a
does make
D.
you,
How,
it
how does
does
he
though.
not
I
get
mean,
an F minus?
the fact that McDaniels was last does lend a lot of credence to these report cards though. It does
Yeah,
make you think that there's a lot of credibility there.
you are right about that. Yeah, if you're smoking cigars after the first game after he's gone, yeah, I'm gonna say you did not like him. You definitely did not like him. That is for sure. That he was hated. I'm just surprised he didn't get an F minus. Like if you can go that low, F minus,
True.
which I guess it exists, or you got screw it, F double minus.
Z. He gets a Z.
Uh, well, George, the report cards are out. Hey, by the way, I don't know about you. That used to be you when teachers talked about report cards coming out. That was like PTSD. That was one of the worst days. Every single
Mhm.
trying to think in middle school, we had we had quarters, I think. So
Yep.
come out 4 times a year, and now it's like, oh my god, I'd be
Every
sweating.
9 weeks.
Progress report too, we'd have like midway through. I'm like, oh god,
We
parent
had to
teacher
have a little
conferences.
we just had to have a little talk last week about just
Oh
a little
geez, that's
slippage.
right.
One as bad
Uh,
as the Colts report card, but it was just a little slippage. So you want to
don't
keep
miss
that up.
those
But hey,
days.
multi-sport athlete, you got to balance your time right now. She's got maybe two sports this spring, so clearly
Oh,
does not get that from me.
jeez. Wow. Yeah, your daughter doing it on both ends, huh? In
She's
school
talking about
and on
being
the field.
track and softball, so that's gonna be a busy,
Wowza.
busy bee.
On top of playing volleyball and basketball.
Yep.
To be young again, huh?
I
Oh, to
tell
be
you,
young
it's
again.
these kids these days too. When she brings her homework home, and I'm like, "You're in fifth grade?" I feel like I was doing that as like a senior in high school. Like,
Well, I do see plenty of those memes that crack me up where it's like your teacher calls and they fail. And it's like you've been doing the homework the whole time.
right? And it's I mean, I know what she's doing, but I don't maybe just misremember, but I don't remember doing this early in my school career. Um, they got a lot on their plate. So coaching this year with girls basketball is a lot of fun because you see the growth in these kids, and I think that's also just puts you in a little bit better mood. You see the youth, a lot of them are on the right track. I know that there's some kids out there who are gonna help society a little bit, no matter what they do.
That has me thinking, George, maybe we should have your basketball team do a report card on you, on the school.
That'd
Practice
be interesting.
facilities, coaching,
Our facilities would not get a very
practice
good grade.
uniforms, travel. How is their parents' cars? Let's just get it all.
Right. How's their cars? How's
How's
our
mom's
bus with no
minivan?
heat? In the Indiana winter, how's our bus with no heat? I'm sure they like that. Not a bus, it's a people mover.
Oh
It
wow, that's
has to be
jeez.
classified as such. Um, no, there's a lot, I
I'll
guarantee our
toughen them up.
facilities
Wow, this
will
is like a
not.
coaching tactic. No heat to the
Yeah,
game.
right. Right. No air conditioning in the summer, no heat in the winter. There is heat. It just feels like it takes forever to heat up on there. But it's
Car's
what,
finally warm as you pull into the parking lot. Like, of course, now it's
right.
warm.
Right, So it's luckily they didn't have a lot of road games, so they probably could not count down too much on it. I think they only were on the bus a couple times. But yeah, facilities definitely. I think our gym that we practice in is like 100 some odd years old. You can feel it. But that toughens them up too. You get in there and you learn the right way, right? Don't need any
That's,
luxury boxes. Don't need
that's an
any courts
authentic
without
gym
dead
right there.
spots here. Yeah. But hey, we got new basketballs this year. Had logos and
Oh,
everything. That was a big deal.
so that'll
Gotta
be an
give big
A,
grades for that. That should be an A.
A plus. Good
Now they're not gonna
basketballs.
like the home uniforms. That's their
Ooh,
biggest complaint. They say they look like McDonald's. uniforms. So, and you know, with the girls team in particular, that's a big deal. Road
Yes.
uniforms, they're all in on. The home uniforms, not so much.
Gotta talk to the designer. I'm a big believer. You gotta look good in order to play good. Those uniforms are
Yeah.
bad. Can't like Colts uniforms are sharp. Well, it's part of the reason why they lost to the Browns, by the way. Those Indiana
Didn't lose a home
Knights,
game. Didn't
one and
lose a home
done.
game. That's all I'm saying. The McDonald's
Wow.
uniforms undefeated in those duds. So, you
Bring
know,
it back next year.
right. Well, I think that's I don't know if there's much option at that point. Unless we're gonna get a grant from somebody. We'll see. But no, it's fun. And I think that's a good example though, because I think if we had between the two teams, eh, 19 kids, I think 19, 18, something like that. So their answer would be all over the place. Some of them are much more worried probably about where we practice, and some of them are much more worried about the bus being cold. They definitely food. They wanted to eat after every game. So that the fact that that didn't happen, we would get a low grade on food, I'm sure. That's
No food. The coaches would starve
that's a
us.
given. Right. No food. We got Chick-fil-A after we won the conference title, so you know
Oh, oh,
there
that's a
was
good
that.
reward. That's a good call. That's a
There was,
really good call.
there are moments, but it's funny because that's what you remember more. Like I can't remember scores, like specific scores, except for one, because it was very ridiculous. But you remember silly things like what happened at McDonald's or Chick-fil-A or something somebody said in a huddle. So, um, and I think I bet if you talk to the Colts, it's a lot the same way. Even though the level is so different, I still think because so many of those guys, what do they miss? I mean, when guys retire, someone will talk about the crowd or winning, but most of them talk about the locker room. They
Locker
miss
room.
the time with their teammates, and that's what they can't replace.
That's true. You're right about that. Wow, that was deep, George. That's a hell of a way to finish here.
That's what happens when I'm late. Get late at night, I get philosophical, I guess.
I like it. We got to do more Blue Horseshoe Pod After Dark episodes now. Just really break
uh,
into Professor George, breaking it down for us. Just talk about life and the Colts weaved into one.
I'll tell you, maybe just lack of sleep during combine week. That's how it goes. Get that clear. At some point, it's gonna go the other way, right? Though, like at some point, like it's a benefit, and then you start to go on that downslide. So probably by like Sunday, I won't make any sense at all. It'll just be gibberish.
As you're looking at like your 50th offensive lineman in a row run a 40-yard dash, and it's just you're
Mm.
sitting there like, what is going on? Hold on, where am I? Just
The only words
crash.
I'll know is like base, explosion, length. You know, that's it. Speed, agility. Nothing else will come through my mind. I'll be,
Bubble butt. I feel like Mike Mayock loves to use the term like that term around this
really does.
time. Bubble butt. He loves that phrase.
He does. My favorite is always he's a football player. You don't get that much from Mayock, but you get it on draft day all the time. Someone gets drafted right away, like he's a football player. Like, thank goodness for that.
It's worried we got a soccer player.
You just never know. You know,
That guy's a football. You're right. That guy's a football player. Gee, thanks. We didn't really know that.
Don't,
Scouting
and for some guys, that's
analysis.
like the greatest compliment. I feel like
It's
for
true.
Shane, that would be the greatest compliment you can get. Like if Shane's like, "You're a football player," that's probably like Purple Heart, from
You're
Shane's
right.
psyche.
Coming from him, that would be good. You feel pretty good about that. All right. Well, we got a lot of time between now and Shane Steichen calling people football players. That is for sure. Thank you for tuning into this edition of the Blue Horseshoe Pod After Dark. Again, YouTube, Blue Horseshoe Podcast, same thing wherever you get your pods. We are scheduled to return next Wednesday. If you have any breaking news, whether it's trades, whether it's maybe Michael Pittman Jr. getting an extension, another player getting signed as well, any Colts news that breaks, we will get you covered right here on the Blue Horseshoe Pod. If not, though, have a great weekend. Talk to you next Wednesday right here on the Blue Horseshoe Pod.